Hi folks, you're with Tacitus today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. Now, in this essay, I'd like to talk about the recent Supreme Court decision in Arizona in the United States, which was to do with verification of electoral ballots. So on one side of the legal case was arguing that there were a number of ballots, as I understand it, approximately 130,000 that were counted, but which did not follow the proper verification procedures. Among the verification procedures, and I think central to the argument that the court case considered was something that's called signature matching with postal ballots. So it goes something like this. If a postal ballot is sent in and there's a signature on the envelope that's meant to match the signature on the ballot or the registered signature in a central sort of information depot now or repository. So what's meant to happen is these signatures are supposed to be matched in part of an overall chain of custody. When these ballots come in, they're supposed to do the signatures match, and if the signatures do match, then it's passed through to be counted for the total vote tally. Now, what happens here is, or what's allegedly happened, and the Supreme Court appears to agree with this, is that signature matching did not take place. So the ballot was taken out of the envelope, and then the envelope was either discarded or thrown away or was lost in the mess of the counting, so that signature matching did not take place. Now, on a technical basis, this means that the ballot is illegitimate because the proper procedures weren't adhered to. Now, the other side argues that kind of who cares, given the COVID the overhang from COVID and the alleged sort of uptick in postal ballots, that the procedures don't need to be as rigorous as they once were because there's a much larger number of ballots to be counted, or that's my understanding at least of so it used to be postal ballots made up a tiny proportion of the total ballot. Now they make up a very considerable proportion, and therefore the procedures to do the verification just haven't quite caught up. So who cares? What's the problem with that? Now, there's obviously the various sides say, well, given the incredible favouring of one political side of the spectrum in postal votes, it's therefore incumbent on the electoral system and the election officials, indeed all of us, the courts, all are concerned, the vote counters, to make sure that the proper procedures are adhered to and that those votes are legitimate and not the result of some very creative and inventive players operating in background. No, I don't know if it was or wasn't, by the way, but those are the concerns that are going around. And I do understand that. I appreciate that. So now what happens is the court has decided that the lower court that originally dismissed this case has to revisit it and go through the signature verification process, or a process that can be used to verify. There's 130,000 votes, so assuming they're all still available and intact and so on, that they would need to be, I don't imagine you'd count every single one. I think you would spot check X amount, and if that suggested problems or indicated problems, then you would count more and so on, and maybe ultimately count all of them in the event that the earlier counting or spot checking indicated that there were certain problems there with the signature verification and thus the validity of the vote. So if the signatures don't match, then the vote isn't valid, or if you don't have a signature to match with it, then it can't be counted. that's how things are meant to go. So there's, how is this going to play out? Well, I guess there's a few directions it can go. One is there's a full recount of signature match, and those votes are proved to be valid, or they're proved to not be valid, or some aren't valid, or so. Now, the other thing is, let's suppose that there has been signature matching issues. Then there's something called vote curating. This is where people actually get on the ground, wear out the shoe leather, and just find the address of Billy Bob Smith at 99 Jones Street, knock on the door and say, "Hey, Billy Bob, did you vote in the election? Is this your signature? Can you give us a sample of your signature?" and so on. So they actually door by door verify it. Now that's a massively labour intensive exercise, but I think it'll be worth the exercise. I mean, say they do a random spread of 1,000, for example, and they find that of those 1,000, 200 are problems. Either the address doesn't exist, or Billy Bob moved away 10 years ago and clearly didn't vote, or the signatures don't match at all, or there's an unusual number of people that are registered to vote in that same house, like there's 10,000 voters registered in the one address, things like that. So they can curate the votes and check on them and to see if they are valid and if not. Now, let's say an election where you had, that's roughly, give or take, 50-50 for the various political parties that are standing. But the mail-in votes are 90-10. Then you straight away would say, "Oh, hold on, that's a little bit unusual." So without even having to curate or count or verify, you'd say, "Well, that's just a little bit unusual. Let's look more closely at this." So I think wherever there's aberrations of that nature, wherever they occur, they should be there should be very, very substantial, scrupulous audit type scrutiny of those votes to ensure that they're legitimate votes and their proper counting and verification process has been followed. I don't think anyone should disagree with that, for goodness sakes. That's a pretty basic thing. I mean, having, again, as I mentioned many times, I've done a huge amount of business traveling, and when I go to third world countries, South America, wherever, and there's an election coming up there, and I mentioned about it'd be interesting to see what happens in the election. Everyone bursts out laughing in the room. This is the local people, I mean. They burst out laughing in the room because, what do you think elections decide anything? Elections don't decide anything. We're a banana republic here. Everything's already preordained. This is all for show and so on. And you realise that free and fair elections are, in fact, very rare anywhere in the world. And the West was the only place where free and fair elections happened sort of most of the time. And even in places like Australia, in tightly contested elections where just one electoral district can decide who gets government and who doesn't, when it's that tight, even here, people are inclined to register a couple of thousand dead people as voters and then just send in fake ballots and that sort of stuff. So it happens here, and people have gone to prison for it. Now, I've actually been an election scrutineer, during a federal election in Australia, so I've got some understanding of these matters, and I thought it was handled, in my view, at least, very efficiently here. Any election, any vote that was considered to be in dispute, and some of these disputes can be whether the voter, put maybe was writing too quickly and they put the tick that fell outside of the little box they're supposed to tick, and it could have been for the candidate above or the candidate below. It's kind of a bit unclear, and those ballots are put to one side, and this is where the scrutineers come in. Now, each political party can put forward a scrutineer. Some of the lesser parties that get hardly any votes, they typically don't bother. But the main parties, it is an issue, so they do scrutinise the votes, and then the let's say there's two parties plus the election official. Now the way it works is unanimity. It's everyone's more happy with unanimous agreement, but if it comes to a disputed vote, if one party plus the independent electoral official decide that the vote should be for this or that candidate, or indeed should be declared an informal vote, where they just don't know what the voters' intentions were. It's a 2-to-1 majority. Now, each party has the option of taking the matter to court. I mean, you wouldn't take the matter to court over one vote, but for example, if there was many disputed votes, that they could take it to court to have that disputation settled by legal means, but that doesn't happen that often. So in the scrutineering side of it, it was done very, in my view, very, very efficiently, where the votes were counted, the votes were scrutinised, and okay, no, I think that voter just went outside the box for candidate A. It was pretty close. Part of the tick goes into the, so we can accept that's a vote for the candidate A. This one's for candidate B. This one, it's just unclear. Why don't we say it's informal? Because we don't know what the voters' intentions were, and so on. So it's done that way. So it's very difficult, not that it can't happen, very difficult for the vote to be interfered with in that sense. But those were in the days when postal votes again made up a minuscule proportion of the total. Unlike the situation today where postal votes make up a large proportion, it's therefore even more incumbent, I think, on all the parties. Everybody wants a free and fair election, or so you would think, and therefore, as it expresses the will of the people, and therefore, systems to scrutinise and check for the validity of the vote is in my view paramount. So coming back to Arizona, there. Now, a very large proportion of the postal votes favoured one candidate over the other, which was at direct odds with the overall percentages of vote distribution. So the postal votes were absolutely critical for one candidate to end up with a win in the election. So if those votes are declared invalid, given the spread and the proportion of votes for unusually high for one candidate over the other, that would have the potential to create yet further issues as to which candidates were legitimately successful and which not. So these are issues that are going to play out. But regardless of the candidates, regardless of the personalities, or regardless of the parties, or the ideology, or the exactitude is the issue here. And the will of the people, I believe, in any democracy, where voting is meant to determine who governs us. Any election should be, all the effort, all the resources should be put on making sure it's absolutely clean and free and fair, and seen to be. Now, given a number of elections are hotly disputed in terms of their legitimacy, then this is something that the authorities, I think, should deal with and go, no, we want to prove conclusively that all and every effort was made to ensure the authenticity of every ballot and the legitimacy, thus, of the outcome. That to me is the paramount issue, and all other issues really are secondary to that. You've been with Tacitus today at your Pushback channel. Thank you for listening.